Little boxes on the hillside, little boxes made of ticky-tacky, little boxes on the hillside, little boxes all the same.
Hello and welcome to the third episode of my Let's Play of Far Cry Primal. Today's episode is entitled Wenja Archaeology. About half this episode is going to be dedicated to exploring the archaeology of the Wenja. Basically what I mean by that is that as an archaeologist, I'm going to be taking the game world at face value, using the Wenja home camp as a point of departure. In a sense, what I'm trying to do is the opposite of what the game developers have done. Instead of taking archaeology as a jumping off point to create a game world, what I'm doing is taking the game world and sort of projecting forward what we might expect from it in the archaeological record, were Oros to be a real world location. So my premise is pretty much that if the Wenja existed, what would we, 10,000 years later, expect to find? I thought this would be a fun little exercise. Again, as an archaeologist, I could go on and on about the inaccuracies in a game like Far Cry Primal, but I think it's a much more interesting thing to do to use the game as a device to really highlight how little information we really have when it comes to the deep human past, and consequently how limited our palette is when it comes to attempting to paint a picture of what life was like. What I mean by all that I'll get to in a second, but first of all I've got to a place in the story where the Udam have kind of been sidelined a little bit in favour of focusing more on the antagonistic nature of the Izila tribe. I fought the Udam in the frozen tundra to the north among the glaciers. In contrast, the Izila are located in the grasslands, swampy, marshy type area in the south of the game world. They are interesting for the reason that, unlike both the Udam and the Wenja, the Izila have agriculture. Their architecture is more sophisticated, and they just seem to generally have a more obvious impact on the environment of Oros. Occasionally you'll see some crazy stuff like Stonehenge-like structures and obelisks with blue paint on them, signalling that you're in Izila territory. Another thing they seem to like to do is take prisoners. While the Udam will kind of bash your skull in and nosh on you until all the tasty bits are gone, the Izila will take you back to their camps and enslave you. But they're also obsessed with burning stuff. Often during combat they'll lob firebombs at you. If you're in a forest or a settlement while these things start flying, you're in for a bad time.
Oh hey, Meklevdi Marava! Wenja warata. Shrash. Ta Izila Santa Dachai Magam. Santa Izila sush dugistaris batari. Sushalhain Wenja dagwash. No sushalhain guana. Purkalash! Wenja purkalash dachayam. Dahata. Koti chutstor. Tachisla. Purkalash tachisla dachaita. Unu gwash. Wash! Ti Wenja mim guama. Wenja gwashta. Ti walkau hi misu fu maiga. Ai shim lausta. Muti sakush Wenja. Walkau hi be. Tahai salwaya. Umana. Ni kaujata.
Up to the point that I've played, the story is mainly about figuring out who the hell these interlopers are, where they come from, what are they doing, what are their beliefs. They are human, but they live differently, they speak a different language. Drawing on my long and proud tradition of Wenja diplomacy, I mainly engage with the Izila through arrows to the face. If you're watching this, Henry Kissinger, I hope you're taking notes. So, with the limited diplomatic options available to me as Takkar, it is up to Tensay the shaman to send me on a vision quest to discover more about the Izila.
Shayu Barwa. Usashwara Hasaris. Pafi. Yasushulhain Purpana. Usapaja. Usapaja.
Samkwa Izila și Tauga. Gratin klepti. Izila krate noaya, lula krate wasam.
Similar to the Udam vision quest, which unfortunately I didn't have time to show in the previous episodes, in this vision quest, you personify the deepest fears of the Izila. In the Udam one, you took on the aspect of the onset of an ice age, whereas here it seems to be you're the vengeful spirit of a volcano firing meteorites at the hapless tribespeople. Gameplay-wise, it's not all that interesting because it's pretty much on rails. Your health regenerates infinitely and you have infinite ammo and everything is a one-shot kill. But part of the fun of taking on the persona of Krati is the absolute mayhem of death and destruction that you rain down upon the Izila. In particular, the game has you targeting their religious structures, the standing stones scattered about the ruins of their village. And then, if that wasn't enough, after the game has you destroy their religious structures, you're given the task of literally blowing up the moon.
Mansi Sahib, Ashauras Kratis Daijo. Shansha, Sushalheim, Spacham.
Nej. Shansha Urusits. Shansha Salwas. Salwaya.
Back in the real world and away from the drug-induced fever dreams of Tensay, I'll be looking at the material reality of the main Wenja settlement in Oros. This will take the form of a guided tour of the village, looking at the material, culture, art, architecture and people inhabiting this little slice of the game world. As you can see, the settlement is located inside this forested gorge with a quaint little stream, a source of fresh water running through it. On the game map, this valley runs roughly east-west, all the better place to get this lovely cinematic sunrise in the mornings. So what the Wenja leave behind, if anything, will survive 10,000 years buried in the ground. As I will show, the answer is unfortunately not much. In fact, I would go as far to say it's bad news from the get-go. I can tell just by looking at how the settlement is inserted in this landscape that not much would be easily recoverable by archaeologists. If you look at this large overhang feature that covers most of the main settlement, stalagmites and stalactites don't usually form outdoors, which tells me that at one point this was a cave, but now obviously isn't. That means that piece by piece this area is still probably going to continue to collapse, more than likely falling on that small child or its descendants. You will also notice that most of the buildings around here are made from perishable materials, hide, wood and the like. Even if we assume that the rock shelter wouldn't collapse more over the next 10,000 years as nature takes its course, the most an archaeologist could hope to find is a couple of post holes in a circle and then maybe a hearth if they lit a fire in the centre. Architecturally, everything else would perish. In an ideal world, an archaeologist using very specific environmental sampling techniques could theoretically detect what are called commensal species in the Wenja settlement. That is, species that live in close proximity to humans, such as beetles, rats, mites, things like that, which could, under ideal conditions, leave behind some micro-remains in the soils that form above the settlement, carapaces, bones, and the like. Just to repeat what I said earlier, roots growing through the cave ceiling don't inspire confidence in me for its stability. Moving into the cave, we come across Dar's hut inside it. With a bit of luck, after the abandonment of the Wenja settlement, this area could theoretically, if it's dry enough, lead to organic preservation of some of the things you see here. At the very least, that fire would leave a nice carbon stain on the floor, which you could carbon date to give an idea of when the cave was occupied. Furthermore, who's to say what's lurking beneath the sediments as Takkar sees them? The cave might have older occupations than he can guess at. There is, after all, about 5 million years of human evolution that has taken place before him. This is all doubly frustrating for me because as the player I collected all of the resources in the game to allow for this to be built, but I'm also an archaeologist and I'm doing it full in the knowledge that none of it will survive. Now here is something cribbed straight from the archaeological record. Jaima the Huntress's hut is seen here with 2 massive mammoth bones adorning the entrance to her hut. Ironically, the strongest evidence that archaeologists have for bone being used as a building material is among Neanderthals. But huts like Jaima's are unfortunately in the minority. A few of the more colourful elements of Wenja material culture could potentially survive. Although Woga's poo totem itself probably wouldn't survive, the little cowrie shells hanging from it, and which most Wenja seem to wear as personal ornamentation, could potentially survive under ideal conditions. Just as a side note, when I showed the making of this totem at the beginning of episode 2, something bothered me about it, aside from the fact that he was rubbing poo on it. And I haven't been able to put my finger on it until just now. Wogar said that rubbing crap on a tree makes it hard as wood, but it's already made of wood. So, I guess he's just a little insane. Anyway, another thing that bothers me about the setting of the Wenja village is that it's in quite a steep-sided gorge, with water running through the middle of it. I think it's fair to say that this cute little waterfall with this babbling brook has had some influence on the shape of this gorge. That is to say, it's actively eroding. I'm going to go out on a bit of a limb and suggest that that is glacial meltwater, and that being the case, it probably has at least a few more centuries of good melting to do. In that time, the valley will get steeper and steeper sided as the river cuts into it. With a bit of luck, this could lead to river terraces forming, and archaeological deposits being preserved within them. However, it could also mean that the valley sides are simply too steep for any soil deposits to form. No soil, no archaeology. It is pretty though. So architecturally, there won't be that much left around. Possibly some post holes, possibly some hearths, but who knows, based on the geomorphology, if they'll survive 10,000 years. One thing you'll see a lot of in the camp is ceramic vessels, pottery, which preserve extremely well with a couple of caveats. If the pottery is poorly fired, or the soil is acidic, or both, it can disintegrate actually over time. Nonetheless, there is evidence in China of people making pottery 10,000 years before the events of Far Cry Primal. And the old standby of Ice Age archaeology, the Venus figurines, are typically also made from fired clay. Now this right here is probably way cooler to me than to most people. It's Karush the warrior making what looks like a biface, a hand axe of some sort. Flint knapping, the act of chipping stone to make tools, is an example of an activity which preserves extremely well in the archaeological record. To such an extent that I actually have a colleague who was handling Middle Paleolithic artifacts once, that is, several tens of thousands of years old, and they managed to cut their finger on the artifact as if it was fresh. And this artifact was made by Neanderthals and still preserved its function, and that to me is pretty amazing. It certainly beats the warranty on your average iPhone. Anyway, as someone who can appreciate a good stone tool when he sees one, I really do think it's cool that the developers bothered to actually motion cap somebody flint knapping. I'd love to know who, and put it in the game like that. Finally, back to the cave where Takkar makes his home. By home, I mean a zebra skin slung on the floor. Not that you see many zebras in the game, actually. Anyway, one of the things you'll be quick to notice is that the walls are bedecked with painted cave art. In-game, these actually serve as a record of how far you've progressed through the story and through building your Wenja village. As time goes on, you'll add little bits and pieces to the cave paintings. Well, not you, I imagine Tensay does it. And the paintings take some very obvious aesthetic cues from actually African rock art, as well as the famous Lascaux cave paintings, Altamira, places like that in Western Europe. There are also echoes of the famous Cueva de las Manos from southern Argentina, Patagonia. It may very well survive. Now, having such a variety of cave art in one location, animals, human figures, tools, would be like finding the Sistine Chapel. It would just be incredible. Unfortunately, you probably didn't notice because I was talking over it, but as Takkar moves through the cave, he splashes in water, which suggests that the groundwater level is quite high, and these caves, if they don't collapse, may actually flood and be either inaccessible, or rising water level may simply wash away the cave art. So I hate to end on a downer, but to recap, of all the stuff, the buildings, the people you see in the Wenja camp, actually, a very, very tiny percentage will make it into the present day. So while the huts and the children playing and the rock art are very evocative and, of course, easy to relate to, of all the things that I've looked at in this very short walkthrough of the Wenja camp, the only things that will definitely survive are chippings from making stone tools, possibly, if we're lucky, pottery, but other than that, really not much. And being able to translate a collection of flakes or a soil sample into activities that take place in a whole landscape over vast periods of time speaks volumes about the incredible limitations that archaeologists often have to work with in order to get an idea of what life was like 10,000 years or potentially much more ago. However, that is definitely a topic that is well beyond the scope of this Let's Play, so for now I'm just going to leave it there. Hopefully I didn't bum too many people out, and thanks for watching.